we saw him pull off quite the win half an hour ago. If you didn't see it, you're going to want to go watch that one in the archives. Beating a turn 0 Leyline of the Void out of Jund. All 4 Insolent Neonates were involved.
Looked a lot like a game of Limited.
Tom wins the die roll. He starts with Copperline Gorge, no play. For Luis Alfonso, it will be Thoughtseize. Tom's on a mulligan to 5 here. And we look at the Thoughtseize, we see Bloodghast, Prized Amalgam, Narcomoeba, and Life from the Loam. Kind of amusing because 3 of these cards want to be in the graveyard.
Tom's hand is a Faithless Looting away from being excellent. If that's the top card of his deck, I think he's in quite good shape. I like that the pick here is just Narcomoeba.
It's the only card you don't want in the yard. So Tom kept his hand with the hope that if he draws a land, he gets to play.
Yeah, you can just cast Life from the Loam and start dredging it. It's not the most exciting dredger, but it's something.
And how good is this? Not only does Tom hit the land, but it's a fetch land, which is great for his turn 2 Life from the Loam.
He's on pace to curve out with a turn 3 Prized Amalgam.
You got to start somewhere on 5 cards. For Tom Ross. All right, he's going to go to work.
And this is one of the weaknesses to the dredge deck. Sometimes it does just beat itself. Even in the more powerful formats, Legacy, Vintage, the deck can just mulligan into nothing. And this is the kind of game that Grixis Control can steal game 1 off of dredge.
So Tom will cast Life from the Loam and get back his Wooded Foothills. 3 cards in hand. We go back to Luis. No plays, he will pass. No blue mana yet for Alfonso. It's a Blackleaf Cliffs and a basic Swamp. Tom dredges Life from the Loam. He puts Narcomoeba into play. And he milled 2 more lands so he can crack this Wooded Foothills. And if he wants to cast Loam again, he can get a full 3 cards.
However, if he wants to cast Prime Amalgam, he just milled his only copy of Steam Vents, so he has to Loam to get that back first.
Okay. Tom's going to go ahead and sacrifice Wooded Foothills. That'll put a 3rd land in the graveyard. Yeah, that's his own. So he has that as a blue source?
He has non-fetchable blue sources.
He has a mana confluence, right? That's it.
So yeah, it looks like this turn's just going to be spent casting Life from the Loam.
Checking to see what lands he has. His shock lands appear to be 2 Stomping Grounds, 2 Blood Crypts, and a Steam Vents. The Vents is in the yard. So he will fetch for that 2nd Blood Crypt and now cast Life from the Loam that draws 3. It's not exactly 3 though, is it? Because he only has 5 lands he can fetch. 3 are in play, 1 is in his hand, and he's got 2 fetch lands in his hand, so the second one doesn't find anything.
Yeah, Steam Vents lets him cast some of his spells, and then the rest of the stuff will just be discarded to a Conflagrator or Faithless Looting later.
Luis, Liliana the Last Hope, is plussed and kills Narcomoeba. Tom will dredge Loam again. This time he dredges into, looks like a Stinkweed Imp and a Faithless Looting. So plenty of tools here for Tom Ross. He'll flashback Faithless Looting.
And yeah, on Alfonso's turn, Liliana, the Last Hope, did about the best thing it could do. It killed Narcomoeba. There wasn't a bridge for Tom.
A Collective Brutality was in the yard as well for Tom. That's another Eldritch Moon card, a 1-of in his main. So Faithless Looting.
So here's something interesting. Yeah. When you play Dredge, you get some weird games where your plan is to hard cast Golgari Dravetroll.
And look at this. Tom mills into Bloodghast, plays a land, gets it back, and puts 2 Prized Amalgams into play.
Yeah, that turned around quickly. Once the Dredge deck gets online, if he hit what he needed to with that Life when he was dredging it, found stuff to really get his engine going.
So Liliana removes the Bloodghast, puts it back in the yard. Luis plays Jace Vryn's Prodigy. But there are still 2 Prized Amalgams in play. As Tom gets a Stomping Ground out of his deck. There's no Shocklands left in his deck that he can fetch for. But he will put Bloodghast into play off that Stomping Ground. Tom Ross, we start turn 5. This doesn't look half bad. He'll dredge Golgari Gravetroll. And despite being on a 5-card, 1-land hand on the play, it's beginning to feel like Tom Ross is pulling away.
Yeah, he needed to peel land to cast Life from the Loam to dredge 3 and cross his fingers. He hit, and his dredge 3 was solid. He cast Life again, and he just found a bunch of stuff. He started dredging a lot more, found creatures that he can bring back the Bloodghast and the multiple prized amalgams, and things turned around very quickly.
Tom attacks for 8. Looks like all 8 damage went at Liliana, so Luis lets that one go. Tom will play a Scalding Tarn, getting a second Bloodghast into play, fetching for Basic Mountain. So he has 1 Basic Mountain in his graveyard and 1 Stomping Ground in his graveyard and the Steam Vents in his hand. So yeah, those are all his lands. But now he's actually going to cast Golgari Grave Troll. The 5 mana Dredge 6 card playing its secret mode. Actually, it's a 7/7. It's great here. Luis will bolt away a prized amalgam, but Tom Ross now has 14 power of creatures.
Yep. Alfonzo can terminate that while the shields are down, though as soon as Tom untaps, the Grave Troll can start regenerating, and it's really large.
So one thing we're noticing is between Bloodghast and prized amalgam, just none of these things are going to stay dead. And does Luis have a way in his main deck to maybe exile them from the graveyard? Can he ever clean this board up?
He's really got nothing going on that front.
He's got Tom. Then he'll have to look at the life total. Tom's at 14. Luis will cast Serum Visions. He's got a Jason play, can flip into a Planeswalker.
So Tom's deck is dedicated to generating very wide boards at a very cheap rate. The one thing that Alfonso is really trying to do in Game 1, he has the 3 young Pyromancers. He can go wide with that plan, but he doesn't have any of them yet, and he doesn't have a ton of mana to really go wide, given that Tom is already quite far ahead on the table.
Luis Alfonso passes. For Tom Ross, it's another Dredge. Picks up another Grave Troll in his hand. I guess he can just keep casting these.
Yeah.
He'll swing with the team. It's 14 damage, not quite lethal. Luis will block the Grave Troll. Before damage, Jace will tap to draw and discard. It will flip into a Planeswalker.
Pick up was young Pyromancer, though I imagine that one's going to be too late here.
Yeah, maybe he could overpower this horde with enough Pyromancer tokens. It'd be a lot of work.
That's really the only thing his deck can do once things get this bad.
Terminate on prized amalgam. Right now, nothing has entered the battlefield from the graveyard this turn. But oh yeah, there's a bridge from below in Tom's graveyard, so he'll get a zombie with that terminate.
Not to mention that amalgam in the graveyard is just a matter of getting more Bloodghast into the graveyard. There's still 2 more in the deck, and Tom has Life from the Loam, so he can set up Landfall to trigger the Bloodghast very easily.
There's so many moving pieces in this deck. I believe when that first prized amalgam was lightning bolted, Tom could have also made a zombie. A lot to keep track of.
I mean, take a look at the stack of cards there on the screen. Tom has to be aware of most of these.
And how about this? Tom goes ahead and gets another Narcomoeba into play, which means those 2 prized amalgams in his graveyard, they are ready to go. This is a faithless looting. Tom going to discard a second bridge from below, a Stinkweed Imp. Play land 6. Pass. Now he could have put the amalgams into play off that Narcomoeba, is that right?
Yeah, it looks like missed triggers on that.
There's so much going on here.
It's also possible that Tom is respecting Anger of the Gods. He does not know that Alfonso does not have that card. I actually imagine that that's what's happening here.
Right, he doesn't. This is enough on the board, and if he doesn't want to lose to Anger.
That helps justify. It makes a little more sense that Tom is casting the Golgari Grave Troll here.
We go back over to Luis Alfonso. I'll just not comment on that then. Jace goes down to 2. Luis resolves a scry here. He'll pass to Tom Ross. Got an extra elemental token. That's another blocker. Tom. Tapping 2 for Haunted Dead. Discards Golgari Grave Troll and Life from the Loam. Okay, this is really smart. Then he gets the prized amalgams back into play on Luis's turn. So he knows that he can.
Yep.
So walk us through this. What just happened
You
here?
have to stop Alfonso on his second main phase because if prized amalgam triggers a return at the beginning of the next end step. So Tom puts the Haunted Dead onto the battlefield on Alfonso's main phase. That causes the amalgam to trigger to come back on his turn. He's tapped too low, so even if he had Anger of the Gods, he couldn't be able to cast it and remove the prized amalgams.
So now he sees 2 mana untapped. He can go for that play. And now we're back to Tom Ross's turn, and he is just dredging the rest of his deck.
And there's a Conflagrate.
Sure. That plus about the 20 power he has in play should be enough. And game 1 goes to Tom Ross. The dredge player, 5 cards on the play, no problem. Tom Ross beating the odds again.
Can't give this deck a second to breathe.
So we are going to look at the sideboard. If there was anything we felt there, it's that it didn't seem to. Luis's deck just didn't seem to matter. Once Tom had, once Tom had enough going on, it was just what.
You cast your spells, I'ma kill you.
All right.
that's the Tom Ross narrative there.
There are some interaction Luis can have. Let's walk through it here in the sideboard.
Yeah, so what he has: 1 copy of Anger of the Gods, 1 Grim Lavamancer, 2 Nihil Spellbomb, 1 Shriekmaw, 3 Molten Rain, 1 Is It Static Caster, 2 Negate, 1 Dispel, 1 Thoughtseize, 2 Engineered Explosives. The Windmill Slams here, the 1 Anger of the Gods. That would have been great if he had it during game 1, and the 2 Nihil Spellbomb. What I like about Spellbomb is it's a graveyard hate piece that can generate some value. If you have the black mana hanging around when you activate it, you can draw an extra card, but also when you cast it on turn 1, you can exile the graveyard on turn 1 if you have to against Dredge's more explosive draws. His other stuff, really not very exciting here. You could try to cast a Negate on something like a Faithless Looting. It's pretty poor.
Yeah.
Not a lot really going on beyond those cards.
Yeah, Molten Rain. I mean, Tom was playing a Light from the Loam deck, so there's not too much reason there, even though Tom actually is light on mana sources.
Well, I was talking. I think it's very important to remember that your graveyard hate has to be very efficient. You want 0 mana, 1 mana stuff, and at 3 mana spells, just following that logic are really just non-starters.
All right, we're going to look at Tom Ross's sideboard. He's got a playset of Leyline of the Void. He's got 3 Ancient Grudges, 3 Abrupt Decays, 2 Memories Journeys, a Collective Brutality, a Dark Blast, and a Nod of the Bone. A lot of this stuff is for fighting other combo decks, but maybe you can use some of it in this fair matchup?
Yeah, there's some argument for using Memories Journey to mess up your opponent's Snapcaster mages. That's kind of cute.
All right.
If you're planning on discarding or milling it anyway, it's kind of free depending on what you want to sideboard out. And then Collective Brutality is kind of solid here. A card that Tom was respecting was Anger of the Gods, and it can go ahead and just pluck that from the hand. And it also is a discard outlet in its own right. And it could kill things like Alfonso's Jace Fringe Prodigy, as well as draining some life just so Tom can discard an extra card.
Yeah, against someone who's playing Jace and Young Pyromancer out of a control deck, I could get behind a Collected Brutality.
Yeah, this card seems quite strong here.
All right. Well, we'll see if Luis can even things up here in Game 2. It's for the second time today, he's on camera against one of the decks that's on the fringes of the format, right? Grixis control is great against the it's good against the middle. Tron is going really, really big, and Dredge is going really small, and that's where Grixis has trouble.
When you register a deck like Grixis Control, what you are saying, if your goal is to win the tournament, is that you have a really good read on the metagame. And if you look at this deck list with that statement, these last 2 matches we've seen Alfonso paired against, they don't line up with his read. He has some hedges against these decks. Of course, he has the Nihil Spellbomb, which is going to matter here. So he doesn't have a ton of stuff for this matchup. This is not what he wants to be playing against.
Remember, this is our last Open here. If you're just watching us, thanks for joining here at the Syracuse Open. Our last Open before the Season 2 Invitational. Now, Tom Ross, a former Invitational winner, he's got his likeness on a couple tokens, as well as our last Invitational winner, Max McVitie. He had chosen the Clue token after his victory with Mono White Humans, the Thraben Inspector and Engineering student. from Ann Arbor, Michigan, won that one. You can still get those through all Opens and Classics from now through next weekend, but you're going to want to pick this one up because once you get a new Invitational winner, you know it's going to mean a new token.
Can't wait to find out what that token is. Not that I'm happy to see the max token go. Those clues are great.
Start the game. Luis on a fetch land. Tom tries a turn 1 Faithless Looting. I was wondering if Luis said something like a Spell Pierce, but no, he does not. Tom will discard Golgari, Grave Troll, and Bridge from below. Yikes.
Not bad. Alfonso really wants this Thought Scour to draw him into Nihil Spellbomb right now.
Yeah, he'll end step Thought Scour. Does he have some graveyard hate? Someone do something. Tom's about to go off here. It's Jace Vryn's Prodigy from Luis. A great card in its own right, but
it'd be a really good window for Tom to have Collective Brutality.
So Dredge of Golgari, Grave Troll puts 6 cards into the graveyard. Narcomoeba, Prized Amalgam, Bloodghast, second Grave Troll. Oh my.
So Golgari Grave Troll, in a lot of situations, it is a draw 6 for this deck. It's a very tight range of things that the Dredge deck is capable of doing, but when you're doing a bunch of them, it is just cheating. This deck is not fair.
Ooh, all right. Tom's gonna do some more things. Here comes Insolent Neonate.
Oh, let's Dredge 6 some more.
Oh, he's gonna discard another Prized Amalgam to draw a card. Now keep in mind that this Prized Amalgam did not see the Narcomoeba enter the battlefield.
Though it will see the other Amalgam or a potential Bloodghast.
Or how about 2 potential Bloodghasts? Because Tom dredged a Grave Troll there with that Insolent Neonate.
If you're Tom, you have to be wary of Anger of the Gods, though.
All right, we can make it 3 Bloodghasts if we must. You're right, Anger of the Gods is a concern. He's going to get back 1 Bloodghast. Yeah, maybe he doesn't want to sack that fetch land. It represents 2 more Bloodghasts.
Right.
So interesting. Bloodghast is a May ability, so Tom does not have to bring back these other 2 Bloodghasts. However, the Prized Amalgams do have to come back here if Luis insists on it. They are not May abilities. So you go to Luis's 3rd turn. He's got double red. You mentioned it. Can we Anger the Gods?
Ooh.
No, it's going to be Young Pyromancer.
That's okay. It's going to take a lot of support to make that one tick, whereas the Anger of the Gods is just a powerful spell to cast, but it's a start.
So you had mentioned those sideboard cards, Nihil Spellbomb and Anger of the Gods. When I'm watching this match, it feels like those are the only cards that matter from Luis. If he just, every turn I'm saying, Luis needs to play Spellbomb, Luis needs to play Anger, and it feels like if he doesn't have them, I don't even care what he's playing.
Alfonso's 3 greatest tools in this matchup are Anger of the Gods, Nihil Spellbomb, and Prayer.
Yeah.
If Tom just misses a whole bunch, he can win that way, but those are his cards that matter. And the Young Pyromancer is a long shot, but it can matter.
So now that Anger of the Gods did not happen, Tom will fetch for Blood Crypt on Luis's end step. That'll get back the last 2 Bloodghasts. So on turn 3, Tom's going to untap. Wow. With 15 power of creatures. And he'll swing it all. Luis is at 19. Lightning Bolt takes care of the zombie token.
Take that.
Makes an elemental.
If you're Alfonso, if it's at all possible, you would prefer to get out of this combat above 10 life. So once you're below 10, Bloodghast becomes a lot scarier card.
Yeah, the 2 Prized Amalgams were blocked. Jace is going to draw and discard before damage so that it can turn into a Planeswalker. This means he is set to take 7 off unblocked creatures. He will. He'll go to 12, lose his elemental token. But he does get a Planeswalker. Tom, keep in mind, has not made a land drop or cast a spell this turn.
What I want to see Tom do on this turn is get a 3rd land and conflagrate one of his Bloodghasts. So he has Bloodghast back in the graveyard and conflagrate in the graveyard so he can just flash that back on a following turn.
Conflagrate's a sorcery. It's why he'd have to do that now.
Right.
He's going to use Conflagrate
that also
to
plays.
Kill Young Pyromancer. And now we go to Luis. It's Anger of the Gods or bust.
Yep. Well, looks like he has Nile Spellbomb, but we are beyond that phase of the game.
Yeah, that would have been great on turn 1. Jace will go down to 2. It's going to flashback Serum Visions, and Thought Scour rather. It's going to draw into not Anger of the Gods. Plays Nile Spellbomb. He drew into Lightning Bolt. Keep in mind there's no Bridge from Below in Tom's Graveyard anymore.
He can survive combat. He can't survive Conflagrate.
So Luis is going to Bolt a Prized Amalgam and then Nile Spellbomb away Tom's Graveyard.
Okay, that takes care of the Conflagrate. Doesn't get to draw the card on the Spellbomb, but gets to not die on Tom's turn.
Yeah, there's only 10 damage on Tom's side of the board. Only.
That's all.
Luis. Looks like Tom's going to put Luis to 4 and take care of Jace.
May as well. Anything that would stop the attack from otherwise being lethal, the Jace won't. Killing the Jace won't impact that.
A Stinkweed Imp added by Tom Ross and a handshake from Luis Alfonzo. So for the second round in a row, Tom Ross with Dredge ends up victorious. He is now 10-2, knocking on the door to top 8 of the tournament.
So next weekend, we go to the Invitational in Somerset.
Yes.
You're building your Modern sideboard.